Hi everyone, my name is Erica James and I'm coming to you from the Public Library in Hiram, where I'm over the adult and family programming. I would love to be in person with you today to answer any questions you have, but for the time being we're just going to make do with a video. I will give you my contact information at the end in case you have further questions, but for now I'm here to talk to you today about your computers, your phones, your devices, and what you can do to use them safely, and ultimately find some digital well-being. So I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts for what to do online so that you can be a good digital citizen. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about security, and I just want you to be aware that I am not a cybersecurity expert by any means, but what I am is someone who has sat down with a lot of older adults. It's part of my job, and have helped them to get acquainted with the online world. When things are back to normal, what we tend to do is set up one-on-one appointments with people to do computer aid. So through those appointments, I have seen a lot of what older adults encounter when they get on the computer or on their phone. So I just hope that the things that I've seen and that I've learned from over the years will be of some help to you today. So let's get started. So let's just begin why we're having this talk in the first place. You are watching this video, so I imagine you already have some idea and maybe some concern over your security online. But here are just some quick stats for you to put some things in perspective. So if you are over 55, you are more likely to be a victim of digital fraud. Another one, according to the FBI in 2017, older adults lost $342 million to scams. That's a lot of money. The thing is scammers will intentionally prey on the vulnerabilities that face older adults in particular, like health, money, loneliness, and frankly, digital illiteracy. If it hasn't happened to you, you probably know somebody who's had their finances or their identity compromised online. It's a common thing. Another stat for you, fake news is 70% more likely to be shared than real news. Okay, so that's kind of a startling statistic. I just heard that the other day and it blew my mind, but the truth is that there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of scams online, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. So I say all of that not to scare you, but hopefully this video will empower you. When I sit down in front of a computer with an older adult, the biggest and most common issue I see is fear. I don't want anyone to ever feel helpless when they think about using their device, because your device should serve you and not the other way around, right? But that does mean that we have to take some time to understand the risks and, take some individual responsibility to learn what we can to protect ourselves and others. So I do really appreciate you watching this video and taking that really important step. So this session is not to scare you, but to empower you. This session is also not to give you a perfect formula. I am just barely old enough to remember a time when we didn't have a computer in the home or an internet connection, but I have had it long enough to get an eye for what's true and false and for what's reliable and what's fraud online. I still don't get it right every time because there is no perfect formula, and also because unfortunately scammers are evolving all the time. The difficult part about talking about this is that so much of it is actually intuitive. When I say to someone, maybe don't click on that, it can be difficult to explain how I knew that they shouldn't do that. But there are definitely some concrete things that you can look for, and we'll talk about that. But the best prescription I can give to people is actually a lot of exposure. So this video is not going to give you a perfect formula, but it is going to help you to start to train your eyes. One more thing that this session is not, it's not going to be an ad for any particular antivirus software. Okay, you might know what I'm talking about when I say antivirus. It's just a security feature that you can install onto your computer for extra protection. Just so you know, I absolutely recommend looking into those. This session just won't deal as much with those options because it really is just a consumer's opinion. So you can certainly read some reviews about that online or check at your local office store. What you need to be searching for is just the term antivirus, give that a try. Instead, what we will be talking about is just your particular choices online. So in this video, we'll really be answering these questions. How can I protect my sensitive information online? How is my data used online? How can I detect scams? And how can I tell what information is true and false? So we'll be talking about security, privacy, fraud, and falsehood. So our first question is, how can I protect my sensitive information online? We're talking about your personal details, your financial information, your health info. All of that is what we mean when we say sensitive information. Just the stuff that you don't want to end up in the wrong hands, right? So to keep that stuff safe, I'll go over questions particularly about using public Wi-Fi. That's something that a lot of people tend to be concerned about. I'll talk about secure websites and good password hygiene. So here's what to know when you're using public Wi-Fi. In case you didn't know, Wi-Fi is just shorthand for wireless internet. So almost any device that you're going to use can hook up to a Wi-Fi network. That's just what allows you to get on the internet. Many public places offer it, so if you're using your device at the library or at McDonald's or a hotel or something like that, you're probably using public Wi-Fi unless you're using your phone service's data. So the question a lot of people have is, should I be concerned about hackers stealing my information when I'm on public Wi-Fi? So let me tell you about what you can do about that. So if you've ever used your device in a public place, or even when you set up your device for the first time at home, you may have noticed that you get a list of options for which Wi-Fi network you'd like to connect to. So which one should you choose? Here's the thing, it is possible that not all of the network options available are trustworthy. This is by no means always the case, but sometimes the bad guys create open Wi-Fi networks, hoping that some unsuspecting person will connect to it, allowing them to eavesdrop on everything you're doing. So instead, be sure to connect to well-known networks, like you want to be looking for the name of the coffee shop that you're sitting in, or the name of the library that you're visiting. Now, if you're concerned, a great tip is just to check with a staff member and ask them what the name of the Wi-Fi network is. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about when I'm referring to all of the different options you can get when you go to connect to your Wi-Fi, over here is an example of the kind of list I'm talking about. You may have seen this on your computer or your device before. The good news is that your device is probably pretty good at putting the correct network towards the top of your list, just based off of how many other people are connecting to it. So you can generally ignore all the random connections listed below it. But again, if you're feeling concerned and uncomfortable, try asking a staff member. Here's my next tip, and it's a simple one. When in public, best practice is just to avoid visiting websites that hold your sensitive information, such as financial or healthcare accounts, or anywhere you might want to do some online shopping. Now, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Maybe checking your bank account or whatever it is just can't wait. The good news is that certain sites have taken extra precautions to keep your information safe. So make sure you're using sites that have taken those precautions. And you know what? That actually goes for whether you are in public or whether you're in private, connected to your own home Wi-Fi network. Really look for those sites that have taken those precautions, and I'm going to tell you how you can know that they have. So especially when you're shopping online, logging into your bank account, anything that has to do with your sensitive information, I want you to take your eyes up to the address bar on your browser. That's where you normally might see something like Amazon.com or Wellstar.com or whatever website you're on. Now, what you want to look for is the phrase HTTPS in the web address, and it's that S that's important, and I'll explain why. So all websites technically start with this code, http://www, right? It is often hidden from view just for space. Now, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's just a way to publish and retrieve web pages so you can view it on your computer. It's a code. Now, when you see that S That stands for Secure Socket Layer, which adds an extra layer of protection on that website. If you've ever heard the term encrypt, that's what it does. It encrypts your information, which means it just makes it difficult for hackers to retrieve your information. It means that a legitimate certificate authority has said, this is the official site and you're safe. Okay, it's like a stamp of approval. Now, depending on your browser, instead of HTTPS, or you might not even see HTTP at all, you might instead see, like in this example up here, just a lock symbol or the word secure. It just depends. But just know that if you see either one of those or both, you're in a safe spot and the website has taken those extra precautions to encrypt your information. Okay, so we've talked about risks using public Wi-Fi. We've talked about using secure sites, and remember that HTTPS or that lock symbol goes for whether you're in public or in private. You want to see that. But here's another really basic element of having a secure online experience, and you're probably already a little bit familiar with this, but we're going to talk about good password hygiene. Now, passwords aren't everything when it comes to security, but having a good password is just like locking your door at night. A robber could still break in, but why make it easy, right? To be clear, there's probably not some hacker out there just sitting around manually typing guesses into a computer until he gets your password right. Okay? The bad news is that there are actually entire computer programs that exist to crack your password. These cracking programs, they know all of the popular passwords, they know all of the patterns you might use, and they know all of the tricks that people use to try to obscure their passwords, like using funny characters in the example up here. Now, the good news is, again, a lot of websites have taken extra precautions to try to make sure that those cracking programs aren't breaking into your account. Now, some of those barriers might be annoying to you. Some examples of those protective measures they take are they might ask, are you a robot? And it might ask you to click on every picture that has a stoplight or a motorcycle or something like that. You may have been wondering what that's for. It's actually for your security. Other times it may ask you to enter a verification code from a different device. So it might be annoying having these extra steps in the process, but they are good protective measures. So yes, the good news is that these websites have taken those extra precautions, but there are also some added things that you can do to make sure that your password is strong and stays protected. Let's talk about some don'ts related to your password. Never use personal information in your password. No nicknames, no birthdays, quotes, pets, hobbies, interests, years, anything like that. If your password is just your wife's name and the year of your anniversary, it's a bad password. Now, don't think that your password is just going to be harder to crack because you added some numbers on the end of it. It really needs to be more complex than that. And finally, don't reuse your passwords. Just think, if all your passwords are the same, as soon as someone gets your Facebook password, now they have your banking password too, because they're all the same. So those were some don'ts. Let's talk about some do's for your password. Do use unusual combinations. I want you to mix up uppercase, lowercase, digits, and characters. Some websites require you to do that when you create a password. You might feel like it's annoying, but it's for your security. If you need to, you can actually make up little sayings or acronyms to kind of help you remember the password, just as long as it's unusual. You can even combine unusual combinations of whole words instead of using abbreviations, just as long as it's unusual. Now, if your passwords aren't already this way, I would really suggest taking some time to go in and change those. Now, it really might exasperate you to think that you have to change all of these passwords and that you have to remember all these completely different passwords on every single different account that you use online. But here's a great tip. There's something out there called a password manager, and there's all different ones you can choose from. Some examples are LastPass, KeePass, or 1Password. You can give those a search in Google or in your App Store. And what these do is they store all of your different passwords. Sometimes they even help you make them up. They're good at making up strong passwords for you, and they save them so that you don't have to remember them. The trick is that you do want to have one really good password that you can remember so that you can log into your password manager, right? Now, despite what some people may think, it is actually fine to write down your passwords on a piece of paper if that's easier for you. Now, of course, someone could break into your house and walk off with all of the passwords of your life on it, and it would just be a really bad time. But honestly, that's so much more unlikely than someone breaking into your accounts digitally. Okay, so as long as that piece of paper is in a safe place, maybe keep it in a locked desk drawer or a cabinet out of eyesight, and make sure you limit the number of people who know where those passwords are. But it actually is a pretty safe way to store that information. Here's another do for you. It's called two-factor authentication, and I referenced this a bit earlier. Here's an example of what this is. Let's say you're logging into Gmail. You enter your password, and then it asks you for another step before allowing you to log in. It basically says, hey, we just sent you a text message to your phone. We need you to punch in the code that we sent you into the computer so we can verify it's you. This is an example of two-factor authentication, which is basically just when a site requires two different methods to get you logged in. So that could be your password and a verification code in a text message or an email or something like that. It can feel annoying at the time. It's another one of those, but it is just another way to protect your information. This means that if someone is trying to log into your Gmail account, they can't unless they just so happen to also have access to your phone or your other accounts. So it just adds an added layer of protection. It just makes it a little bit harder for somebody to break into your accounts. Many sites automatically use two-factor authentication, but for a lot of your accounts, you can go into your settings and turn it on, and I would really recommend doing that if it's available to you. Doing that will look a little bit different for each different website or app or whatever you're using, but if you're in your Gmail account or your bank account, Facebook, whatever it is, keywords to look for to see if you can turn on two-factor authentication would be words like account, settings, and privacy. So keep an eye out for those words, and that will let you adjust those settings. Let's start by talking about cookies, just because this may be a word that you've been seeing as you've been browsing the internet, and not everybody knows exactly what it means. So a cookie is a small piece of data from a specific website that's stored on your computer while you're browsing the web. It allows website to offer you all of these simple conveniences like remembering your login details or keeping items in your shopping cart even after you've left that website. But cookies also track your browsing activity. When I say browsing, I mean searching or just any activity you do on the internet. And it tracks that so that people can serve you up targeted information like ads. That's why if you were searching for a new lamp on Amazon earlier, you might just happen to see ads for lamps on Facebook later. There are a lot of implications when it comes to data like this being stored and shared. Part of what this means is when we talk about privacy online, we're not just talking about the things we've discussed before, like some individual hacker discovering your personally identifiable information like your name, address, social security, and things like that. It's actually not just about that. Part of what we need to be aware of when we are using online services is the reality of data mining. There are actually entire professions dedicated to mining data and selling it. When I say data, I mean things like your search history, your purchase history, really any scrap of interest that you indicate online. You would be surprised at the things that data miners find interesting. All of that is really a gold mine to people who work in marketing and who want to advertise to you. It's, a great business tactic to target the right people with the right products. And within certain bounds, it is entirely legal. Any company you think of is probably using this method. Now, you may not realize it, but you've given certain websites permission to use your data in this way and to hand your data over to other companies in a lot of cases. So here's a couple of examples of how this has worked before. In 2018, Facebook gave several big tech companies like Netflix, Microsoft, and Amazon, Facebook gave them access to various different types of data belonging to Facebook users. That included their contact information, information from their private messages, and their friends list. And they rake in billions of dollars as a result of targeted advertising to you. Another example, there are app developers who create games, including some for kids, that turn on your smartphone's microphone simply to gather marketing information for consumers. A little scary, right? But it's a reality. Another one, and this is very recent, Amazon just released a wristband that you can wear that tracks your motion, your body fat, your sleep temperature, your emotions, and more. Okay, so at this point in history, your data is just the most valuable commodity out there. And it's just really important to be aware of that when you are online. Now, all of this just leaves you with the question, how comfortable are you with this? Truthfully, it is virtually impossible to avoid leaving any kind of data trail if you're going to be on the internet. And the internet is an incredible resource that you don't necessarily want to give up on out of fear. So if your data being out there is a concern to you, there are a couple of ways that you can control that to some extent. So I'm going to tell you briefly about just a couple of those. Okay, here's a big one that people almost never do. Before clicking agree when you are registering for an account, read the terms and conditions. Okay, anytime that you're signing up for a social network, anytime you're signing up for a credit card or creating any kind of account online, they ask you to check a box that says, I agree to the terms and conditions. A lot of times people don't read it. If you want to know more about what they're doing with your data and your information, that's where you would go to find that out. Now, if what you find doesn't sit well with you, don't use that service. Here's another one. Review your privacy settings in the websites you use and the apps that you use. You should ask yourself whether certain apps really need to know certain information. A lot of apps, for reasons that aren't obvious, want to know your location. Sometimes they have options to turn that feature off, or sometimes you might just have to delete the app if you really don't want it to know that. So delete apps that you no longer use and then adjust the privacy settings if it's available in the ones that you keep. And lastly, we've talked about cookies. There are some ways that you can control or limit cookies in your browser settings. So when I say browser, I mean Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge. Those are some examples. Now keep in mind that banning all of your browser cookies could make some websites really difficult to navigate, but you can limit them. Keep in mind that every website and every app looks a little bit different. So when you are going into all of those individual accounts to adjust your privacy settings or limit those cookies, those settings might be found in different places. But here's a short list of some keywords you can look for just to guide your eyes and help you find where you can adjust those settings. So those words are things like tools, internet options, advanced settings, browsing history, preference, content settings, cookies, and privacy and security. If you're not seeing any of those words right away, try looking for a gear symbol like the ones over here that almost universally means settings. So ultimately, there is a bit of a trade-off when using the internet. Nothing is truly free, right? You might have heard the quote before, if you're not paying for the product, it could be because you are the product, which is a little bit scary. Now remember, I didn't make this video to scare you, but I do just want to make you aware of how your data is used online and the steps we can take to manage it if we want to. The next question we're going to deal with is, how can I tell it's a scam? How can I detect these? I'm going to be particularly talking about email phishing scams because that's a lot of what I see affecting older adults. So first of all, let's talk about some qualities of a scammy email. So first of all, scammy emails are usually urgent. They might say things like log in right away or send money right away. They want you to do it now or else. Another quality of scammy emails is they ask you for sensitive information. So a legitimate business is never going to ask you to respond directly to the email with your sensitive information. It might ask you to call them or to go to the website and log in and put in your information that way. But it's never going to ask you to respond directly to the email with your social security number or something like that. I've seen scammy emails that are posing as the IRS, as a bank, as your Netflix account, and asking you to click respond and send, your bank account information or your social security number. A legitimate business is never going to do that. Another giveaway of scammy emails is that they often have misspellings and poor grammar, so try to be a close reader when you're looking at an email. Another tip is to check out the sender's email address. Sometimes it's a dead giveaway, sometimes it's full of unusual numbers and words that don't even match the content of the email, so take your eyes up to that. That's just another way you can know that it's scam. It's not always immediately obvious that an email is a scam, but here are some things to just be skeptical about if you receive an email about it. Really beware of anything that says it's a free prize involved. If you think an offer is too good to be true, it probably is. Even if it's from a store you trust, maybe question it, maybe go directly to jcpenney.com or wherever it's coming from and see if that offer is actually real. Here's another one, and this can be particularly nefarious. Whenever there's a national disaster or anything like that, con artists have a field day sending bogus requests for donations. So they're preying on your charitable heart, but you might be sending your money to someone who shouldn't have it. This one is really tricky. Watch out for lookalikes. Here's the thing. Scammers are always evolving, as I said before. It isn't always like a Nigerian princess asking for money, right? More often, it's an email that really looks legit. So here's an example. Of a really tricky lookalike email. So it appears to be from a bank, and even worse, it's kind of suggesting that maybe something's wrong with your bank account. So that would worry you, right? You would want to take care of that right away. It looks pretty legit. It has the bank's logo. It has a link to the website. It seems formal. It looks legit. But if I were to click on this link here where it says to log in, it would direct me to a fake page asking for my user ID and password, and when I enter that information, guess what? I'll be giving it directly to a scammer. Now, there are just a couple of indicators that this might not actually be from SunTrust. For one thing, it says Dear SunTrust Client. Usually when it's actually from your bank or from a business that you're signed up with, they'll use your name. Another giveaway is there are a couple of grammatical errors throughout here. Now, those little bits and pieces aren't immediately obvious, so I do have a tip for you that you can try to use every time, and it might work out a little better than looking for those little hints of scam. The best advice I can give you is to go straight to the source when you receive a questionable email. Don't click on links, don't open attachments, or like I said before, respond with your sensitive information. Instead, if you get an email from your bank, from Netflix, from Facebook, whatever, open up a new tab in your browser. Go straight to netflix.com or to your bank account's website and log in from there instead of following the link from your email. Okay? And then you'll be able to see within your account on the legitimate website if there are any notices that you need to know about. Or if you're really concerned, and if it's your bank or Netflix or something like that, you can give them a call and they can look into that for you. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine with the current situation our world is in, here are some current common scams that are going on right now. So some of those are related to work from home opportunities, Your stimulus package has been a big one, and medicine and health. Just be especially skeptical if you receive emails about these or see posts on Facebook or online about them. Scammers absolutely prey on vulnerabilities and desperation, and these are definitely some areas where people are starting to feel particularly desperate. So just be skeptical when you see things related to these issues. Now, if you want to continue to stay up to date on current scams and what's being passed around, just so you can be in the know, I've listed a link down at the bottom of this slide for you. You can punch that into your browser, or if you want, you can search Consumer FTC Current Scams or Scam Alert in a Google search. Okay, so we've talked a bit about scams and what you can do to pick out information that's true and what's false. And we've talked about that specifically related to email, but what about more generally, right? What about just a news article that you might see online? What about a post on Facebook or a meme? How can you tell what's true and false online? It's been said that we're living in a post-truth era where just falsehoods and fake news abound. You've probably heard of different fact-checking websites that people use to try to determine if what they're reading is true or false. And honestly, it can seem really overwhelming to think that you would have to fact-check so much. It can be really discouraging to think of how much disinformation there really is out there. Something I've noticed that people do is they'll share posts on Facebook or whatever social media they're using just based off of the headline and not even opening the page to see the content of the article. And that's really important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to just assess the credibility of a news site because there are so many out there that are fake. I'm going to talk specifically for a moment about fake news and about looking at a news website and trying to discern, should I believe anything that's coming out of this site? So here are some things you can look for. First of all, look for unusual URLs. A URL is what I talked about before. It starts with HTTP, www. It's the web address that's in the top of your browser. Okay, so look for unusual ones, including those with .co. A lot of sites might try to use that to appear like a legitimate news site, but they're not. So if it looks strange up there, maybe question it. Here's another thing to look for. Look for signs of low quality, like words in all capital letters, headlines with just glaring grammatical errors, but also bold claims with no sources. Look for sources. And also sensationalist images. Sometimes you get this really sensational image that's actually completely unrelated to the story. So check the dates on the story in the picture. Sometimes they don't actually go together. Now this tip is a little bit more about bias and skew rather than just being complete outright disinformation. Check on a site's About Us section. Look towards the top of the website and see if you see different tabs going on, and that's where you might see About Us. Find out who supports the site or who's associated with it. Ask yourself too, are they trying to sell you a product? Is a company or particular organization supporting this website? And do they have any particular biases? What is the writer of this article's bias? My next tip, consider whether other credible mainstream news outlets are reporting the same news. If they're not, it does not mean it's not true. It just means that you might need to do some deeper digging. You can check fact-checking sites before trusting or sharing news that seems too good or too bad to be true. Some people use those, some people don't trust them, but the fact is I just want you to check other sources to see if anybody is corroborating the information that you're seeing. And my last tip on this is to check your emotions. Clickbait and fake news strive for just extreme reactions. If the news you're reading makes you really angry or even just super smug, it could be a sign that you're being played. Again, check multiple sources before you trust information that you see online. So those are my main tips for do's and don'ts of being online, of achieving some semblance of digital well-being, I also wanted to leave you with some resources so that you can dig deeper, because these are just such huge topics. So here are a couple for you. There's the AARP. They provide specifics on internet safety, how to protect your privacy, and information on the most up-to-date virus protections. The FBI also has a good list of common fraud schemes that are aimed at older Americans. Fraud.org helps also protect consumers from being victimized by fraud. And then there's the Federal Trade Commission's Pass It On campaign, which enlists people 65 and older in an effort to recognize and report fraud and other scams. It helps if you also know how to report fraud so that other people aren't being affected. And that's another piece of this huge topic of digital citizenship, is it's not just for your own safety, it's also for the safety of others. So when we don't check our facts, when we don't check other sources, and we just kind of mindlessly share whatever we want on the internet, we're affecting other people. Right? Misinformation has real world consequences, and it's really important to be mindful of that. Okay, so just to sum it up for you, here is your digital well-being checklist. First of all, we didn't get deep into this, but look into security software for your device. Next, make sure to use secure sites on secure networks. So that means looking for that little lock symbol or HTTPS, and also making sure that you're connected to a safe Wi-Fi network. Next up, strengthen your passwords. That might take a little bit of time going into each of your accounts and changing those passwords, but it's probably worth it. Next up, manage your privacy settings, especially if it's a concern to you whose hands your information is ending up in. Next up, say no to scams. Use those couple of tools that we talked about to detect if an email is sketchy or not. And then lastly, think before you share. Again, I want to thank you so much for just taking the responsibility to learn a little bit more about how you can be a good digital citizen, protect your own security and the security of others. If you have any questions, like I said, I'm not a cybersecurity expert by any means, but my email and the library's phone number are listed up here. One day it might be possible that I could see you in person or set up an appointment to help you with your particular advice. I would love to do that, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, thank you so much for watching. Bye!